Weird Damn Radio.
Hello, good evening, welcome. I am Samuel Trapp. This is Damn Radio, as you just heard. And my show is called International Flavor. I'm very glad to be here. I don't know, I've got a lot of news going on tonight, lots of interesting things to talk about, and how many windows up on my computer? Crazy amount. But before I get to that, I want to let you know that I have decided and started preparing for it earlier today. I am planning a show for Thursday night, and I am going to look at the Missouri bar about I call it corruption. Now, you don't have to agree if you don't wish to, but there's something mighty strange with the way that certain things are allowed to occur in the legal world, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense with how it is allowed to proceed. And so I want to talk about it, and I like to talk about, I say it's bar corruption or bar control, and that they disguise it as oversight, and sometimes with, sometimes without legal authority. And I'm going to do an entire program on that on Thursday night, speaking about 3 programs and then outline exactly how. So, how does power really work in Missouri's legal system? And I don't mean in a courtroom. I don't mean in statute. It happens in committees. Quiet, obscure, 7-person, they like to call them oversight committees, but they're handpicked by the bar and they're shielded from the public. We're talking about people who can decide if a lawyer's fee is too high. They hold the keys to a secret slush fund that pays out against dead, disbarred, incapacitated attorneys. And they also, same sort of crew, gets to determine who gets to wear a black robe and be a judge. And you might think I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. And all 3 of these programs have not quite identical, but very, very, very similar programs, and all the same faces participate in them. And the only public input, if you can call it that, is in one of the programs where judges get appointed. The governor gets to appoint 3 of 7 civilians, as they like to call them. But even that process, you don't know how they become entangled or allowed. And the bar still controls the outcome. So, I mean, let's be real. It's all theater. And the agenda and the gatekeeping is always the same. You know how I feel about that if you've listened to my show at all, with how the government works. So Thursday night, we're going to go deep. We're going to be naming names if we can find them. That's another part. It's extremely difficult to find out who selects the selectors, who regulates the regulators. It's a racket. It is definitely a racket. And who puts these people in power, and where does the power come from? We're going to go into all that. And with 3 programs. And if we don't get finished, we'll just keep on going. If it takes me longer than the typical show, I'm going to keep on trucking to make sure my points are made. So tune in, speak up. It's not oversight. It's a racket. If you'd like to get on to my international flavor Facebook page. You can sign up for the event there and get on, share it, and let other people know about it. Because especially if you know any, and I say, if you listen and disagree, especially if you're a lawyer, a judge, or God forbid, a member of the bar regulatory committees, and where you get this power, I'd love to hear from you. And I have no problem. Maybe you'll convince me that I'm wrong. I doubt it. Maybe by the end, I'll convince you, and we shall see what shall be seen at that point. And hopefully, we can discuss these issues. I think that a lot more people need to pay attention to this than do. One other small piece of news. I think my brother may be doing a bit of a regular program here. We're having some chat about it, and bringing Mr. Matthew Vaughn in, Matthew Vaughn Trapp, that is, to because he's got some interesting perspectives, and so we shall see what shall be seen. I want to invite anyone tonight to call should they feel like it. The phone lines are indeed open. 573-746-8020, and we can chat. I want to get into it a little bit further and discuss where we go. There's been a lot of news. Now, I watched earlier today one of my regulars. One of the odd things that happened is, so far, usually by 5-6 p.m. on a Sunday, my regularly scheduled Sunday program for Vladimir Solovyov Večer se Solovyovom, which means evenings with Solovyov in Russia. And I like to watch on Sunday night. Usually I'm able to download it and watch it, and I get all the new news for the week, basically. First show of the week for them, because he also does Sunday through Thursday. And I try to get as much information out of that 1 3-hour segment as I can. Give me some places to go and look. But I've been watching, and so far, it has not hit. So I don't know. It's not shown up in the U.S. yet. And they do it in the evenings on Sundays. It's a live program over there at 6 p.m., which means here, when it starts, it's actually 10 a.m. So usually by 6 p.m. here, I can see it and I can watch it. It takes a little while to get it uploaded. So something has happened, and maybe they're being blocked again. That's happened, where they get blocked. And I haven't used a VPN in a while. Maybe I'll have to break out the old VPN again. The only other thing I wanted to tell you about is a little bit of a warning for tonight, is that I have been yawning like a madman this evening, and I do not know why I am yawning like a madman. Well, maybe it's because of the Pink Floyd show that I did on Friday night for 4 hours, and I was up very late, but I never sleep anyway, so I don't understand why that would perhaps make any difference. And who the hell knows? We shall see what shall be seen, but there's going to be plenty to listen to on Thursday night. I want to dive into where we're going to go. One of the shows, since Solovyov wasn't up, and usually I can get some good data from Solovyov, I've been out slumming and picking up other news. Now, I like to read the Kiev Times. I read Kiev newspapers, the Kiev Independent, and I especially like to look for polls because since I was watching a different channel and I never saw anything of Solovyov, there was another guy that I watched who said that there's been a recent poll conducted and Zelensky got less than 20% in whether or not he would be selected by voters, people in Ukraine, to be the president again. So he only got 20%. Meanwhile, Zelensky, who's been basically exiled to England, not exiled, but they took him down from the military post as the commander he's not the commander in chief, but the top general for the military a year and a half ago, was it? I don't remember for sure, but it's at least a year. And they took him down and installed Sikorsky instead. And Zelensky is pulling in 75% of the electorate is saying that they would vote for him. And now they can't have elections until the war is over because Zelensky won't allow that. He wants to have power forever, number one, and he doesn't want elections. He's very much against it. And now, and if the polls are any indication of why, but the poll information that I did a search for came out with the published one. So I don't know if I believe the information or not, because I have some other news as well where it came in with Zelensky not getting as much information and as much of the voter support, but he's at, say, and it's more of a favorability rating. It didn't give the ability to pick between the two, like you have to pick between Zelensky and Zelensky. You have to pick between favorability ratings, and the favorability ratings of Zelensky are 72 to 75, the same amount they were claiming that he was winning the election race if there was to be an election today. But the favorability rating for Zelensky was still at 62%. So I don't know. Maybe the source that I watched earlier today, and you got to be careful about this because in today's world of trouble and gloom, where passing ruffians can say "ni" at will to old women, it's hard to tell if you're being lied to in the news or not. You really gotta check your sources, and I suggest you do try to. But the Kiev Independent did say that, and this is a Kiev newspaper, says that Ukraine's parliament is working on a bill to actually organize post-war elections. Now, I've been listening for a little bit. Of information because it's very curious. You start to get some of these things that they are beginning to discuss. And what it means to me is that they actually are closer to resolving the conflict than not. And so, if they are having polls, if they are putting bills into effect or attempting to have elections. So today, June 29, Sunday, Ukraine's parliament, it's announced in the Kiev Independent, is working on a bill to organize post-war elections, says the speaker. the chairman of the Verkhovna Rada, Ruslan Stefanchuk, said in a speech, said that they're starting this, they're trying to get it ready. So he said on June 28th, yesterday, that Ukraine's parliament is preparing a draft bill to hold elections following the end of martial law period enacted, allegedly because of the war. And they're working on this draft law now because for the next elections, a new special law is needed to regulate the post-war election, he said on Ukraine's Marathon TV broadcast. He said, we're approaching various scenarios so that people can exercise their fundamental constitutional right to vote. Whoa! Oh my God, they have a constitutional right to vote in Ukraine. Wow. This is awesome. He also said, we are preparing various basic scenarios so people will be able to find the right legislative compromise to allow this to happen. The reason for separate legislation on a post-war election, said Stefanchuk, was due to the fact that Ukraine's constitution does not provide clarity on the details of holding elections following the end of a martial law period. No details on the bill or timeline were provided. Russia's full-scale invasion, now remember, that depends on who you ask, and subsequent declaration of martial law in Ukraine meant elections have been impossible to hold. And Zelensky his term has been extended. And some lawyers say it's allowed under Ukrainian law. Others disagree. Despite criticism, Ukraine's parliament, the Verkhovna Rada, passed a resolution on February 25th to hold elections after a comprehensive, just, and sustainable peace is secured in the country. While polls show a vast majority of citizens do not support holding elections before a full peace deal, the lack of elections has stirred controversy with many Ukrainian allies. Now, I don't believe any of the internal polls either. At the end, and if that's the case, why is Zelensky winning? At the start of his second term in office, Trump urged Ukraine to hold elections, something that Ukraine has thus far refused to do, citing the difficulty of holding elections. Now, remember I told you maybe a week ago, that they're trying to, there's another one another bill in the Verkhovna Rada that would make it, they would terminate the citizenship of those living in Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, and Lugansk, as far in Crimea and Russia and the United States and anywhere else, so that it only focuses on the people that are there. Meanwhile, in other news, Zelensky said he is willing to step down in exchange for a peace agreement. Now, that was a long time ago. Russian propaganda has widely used the issue of elections in Ukraine to discredit Ukrainian leadership. Moscow repeatedly claims that Zelensky is not a legitimate president. That's true. They do say it a lot. There's a couple other articles from the Kiev Independent. Yesterday, another F-16 was lost, along with its pilot, and during Russia's overnight massive airstrikes last night. Maxim Ustimenka, who was born in 1993, was killed after shooting down several aerial targets, said the U.S. Said the Air Force in a statement. The Air Force added that his aircraft was damaged while he was trying to shoot down another one, and he lost altitude and crashed. Sikorsky, the general who took over for Zelensky, says that Russia has amassed 110,000 new troops at near Pokrovsk. Now, I've been telling you about that for a little while, and we shall see what happens if they ever do pour in for a major offensive. So that is what we have from the Kiev Independent this Sunday evening. And there were some other stories. Where is this one? This one's from the Ukrainian National News. They tell a few more. Trump's considering new sanctions, according to Graham, after the July vacation. Let's see. The pilot who died was already given the Hero of Ukraine medal by Zelensky. So we have that as the news also. And the other source is Kiev 24 telling us about the news and about the new election. I was looking at all three of them, trying to find any source that would give an updated, some kind of a poll on Zelensky, if I could find one. Also, Ukraine has officially withdrawn from the Ottawa Convention on the prohibition of anti-personnel mines. Yes, they don't. They want to use these anti-personnel lines. They want to, and this is major actually. And I want to read this to you because Zelensky is all for it. He gave a speech the other day, and now Ukrainian, I of course don't understand Ukrainian. Some of the words are similar, but it's completely different. Last week I was talking to you a little bit about I can tell when a Ukrainian is speaking Russian, and they speak a lot more softly. All the G's are H instead of G. And so that's really popular these days. I remember I was telling a story about somebody named Olga, but if it's Ukrainian now, it's no longer popular to spell your name as Olga. You have to spell it as Olga with an H, Olga, and not a G, Olga. And they talk softly in Ukrainian, and it's very popular now to show that your accent is from Ukraine, not from Russia, even if you're speaking Russian. And I have run into several who refuse to speak to me when I say something to them in Russian. They just won't do it. There's a store nearby, and one of the ladies in particular, and I keep trying to talk to her in Russian, and she just will not do it. Every time I say something to her, she answers in English, and she won't do it. And I've thought about I don't want to be booted out of the store, though, you know what I mean? So I don't want to create problems. But anyway, the latest story, Ukraine officially withdraws from the Ottawa Convention on the prohibition of anti-personnel mines. Reason for the withdrawal from the convention and the international context of restrictions and reactions, not restrictions, from other countries. President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, has signed a decree formalizing Ukraine's withdrawal from the Ottawa Convention on the prohibition of anti-personnel mines. Alarming, really is. The document came into effect after being published on the official website of the President's office. This is reported by Kiev 24. The reasons for Ukraine's withdrawal. The President's decree implements the decision of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine on June the 29th, which provides for the country's withdrawal, and it's for prohibition of use, stockpiling, production, and transfer of anti-personnel mines, as well as calls for their destruction. This was previously announced by Member of Parliament, Secretary of Parliamentary Committee on National Security, Defense, and Intelligence, Roman Kostienko. According to him, the decision was dictated by the current situation at the front, as Russia is not a party to this convention and uses mines against Ukrainian military personnel and civilians. Now, I've never seen any. I know they're dropping anti-tank mines all over the place, but I haven't seen any anti-personnel ones. So we cannot, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. I don't take a position one way or the other, because obviously I don't know. We cannot remain bound under conditions where the enemy has no restriction. We are now awaiting the consideration of this issue in the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. The legislative consolidation of this decision should ultimately restore Ukraine's right to defend its territory. The Ottawa Convention was signed in 1997 by 164 states that have committed not to use, develop, produce, or transfer, as well as to destroy all existing stockpiles. However, countries such as the Russian Federation, the United States, China, India, and Pakistan have not joined as signatories. So the U.S. isn't part of this either. In 2025, the defense ministers of Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Poland urged their governments to withdraw, arguing that military threats to NATO countries by Russia, that's a joke, have increased. If you guys stood down, perhaps, and didn't stop poking the bear, maybe you wouldn't have to worry. The corresponding decisions have already been supported by parliaments of the Baltic states, Poland, and Finland. I don't know. I think I wonder why the U.S. isn't a member. Rather strange, wouldn't you say? What else do we have here, friends and neighbors? Putin suggests Ukraine could have UN-led government to organize elections. He too is speaking about elections because he says he doesn't want to sign any deal with Ukraine signed by Zelensky, because according to him, it would have to be signed by somebody else who has constitutional authority. So that could be, I'll give you an idea of what his article says here. U.S. rejects suggestion, and Kremlin later clarifies an idea as just one of an option, a group of options, and it wasn't raised with Trump. Vladimir Putin suggested Ukraine could be placed under temporary UN-led government to organize fresh elections with both Moscow and Kiev. The idea was rejected by the U.S., and it was not clear how far it was meant to be taken, given that the Kremlin clarified that it wasn't raised with Donald Trump by Putin. But the remarks do indicate that any negotiated end to the war in Ukraine is some way off, as Russia continues to add conditions to achieving a settlement, while Kiev said it would sign up for a 30-day ceasefire if Moscow would. Well, Moscow keeps saying that we want to have a permanent end. We're not going to sign up for 30 days and then extend and just allow you to rearm and remobilize Crazy stuff. Let's see what else we got. Peeps. I already told you about the Ukrainian fighter pilot. And what else? Yeah, there was Zelensky is calling for the U.S.'s help. This is from Reuters, looks like. Zelensky, speaking in his nightly video address, said that the pilot, the one who died, Ustimenko, had been flying missions since the time the campaign that began in 2014 against Russia in eastern Ukraine. He mastered 4 types of aircraft and had important results to his name in defending Ukraine. It is painful to lose such people. Well, it is war. Ukraine says recent attacks highlight the need for further support for Washington, which President Trump has not committed to any new military aid for Ukraine, which I'm all for. Trump said he was considering a Ukrainian request for more Patriot missiles after they met at the NATO summit last week. This what must be brought to an end. Pressure on the aggressor is needed, and so is protection, Zelensky said in his post on X. Ukraine needs to strengthen its air defense, the thing that best protects lives. So strengthen it. Who's stopping you? That's my question. Why is it our obligation for you to strengthen your air support? Perhaps if you had learned how to get along with your neighbors before that, you wouldn't have the troubles that you currently have. I don't know. I'm a little grumpy about all of that. And I'm on the tired side. What is wrong with me here? Friends and neighbors, what is going the heck on? I tell you what, it's been a very beautiful but very long weekend. So let us get into some other news. I want to get to a little bit of a lighter topic. Does anybody know who Igor Sikorsky was? So I used to work in the Army. I was signed for, at one point, 3 Sikorsky EH-60 helicopters. Not UH-60. I had the electronic warfare version. And they were collection and jamming platforms that I was in charge of. And they were pretty cool. But it was basically a UH-60 with millions of dollars worth of collection and jamming equipment. I looked up one of these recently, and they still have them, but now it's gone. And when I got one, when I signed for 3, it was called the Sikorsky EH-60 Alpha Quick Fix 2 helicopter. And later, here's the description of it. Now they have the EH-60B Quick Fix. And to fix is to fix the location of the enemy, because that's what these helicopters were used for. We could be a mile behind behind our own lines, and still radio traffic would come up, and we could figure out exactly where they were located using these cool quick fix helicopters. So the Army acquired examples of 2 EW electronic warfare Black Hawk variants designated EH-60 Alpha and Bravo. Development began in 1980 when Sikorsky was awarded an Army contract to modify 1 UH-60 Alpha for evaluation under the electronic warfare program. I was among the first to be able to use these in training environment, and it was really pretty cool. And the H-60 was equipped with the AN/ALQ-144 infrared countermeasure set and shaft flare dispensers, in addition to standard radar warning receiver. The YEH-60 Alpha EW Black Hawk flew for the first time in September 81, and in October 84, the Tracor Aerospace Group won an Army contract for the conversion of 40, and we got the first 3 at Fort Hood, Texas. Flight testing of a planned 132 production Alpha model EW Blackhawks began in April 86, though budget restraints ultimately led the Army to acquire only 66. The last of these was delivered in September of 89. I think we got up the first ones in 87. Soon afterward, the type's designation was changed from EH-60 Alpha to EH-60 Charlie. The EH-60 Charlie is intended to locate, classify, disrupt enemy signal traffic, and it was developed specifically to carry the standoff target acquisition system radar. The H-60B was characterized by a long box-shaped SOTA scanner mounted on the main cabin and was equipped with backward retracting main landing gear legs to allow the SOTA antenna to rotate fully in flight. The H-60B made its maiden flight in February 81, but I don't even know that it ever got released, but I could be mistaken on that. And then there's a bunch of technical information on it. Well, anyway, the Sikorsky is the UH-60. I had to, let's see. I went to air assault school and learned how to jump out of helicopters on a rope and whatnot, but mainly you did that on the UH-1, what everybody called the Huey. The UH-1 is just regular utility aircraft, some with mounted guns in them and some just for cargo. And there would be, those are the ones that are on a skid. The EH and the UH-60s are on wheels. But I also had to learn how to do what is called sling loading. And the helicopters that can sling load are the great big Chinook helicopter. And I learned how to sling load out of there. And I was I'm not really that small, so I don't know how it came to be that I was one of the smaller guys in the class. Maybe I was the only stupid enough to do it. I don't know. But I learned how to do it, and I got, I remember being up on top of a pod of fuel. And these pods of fuel, I don't know how many gallons there are. It's huge. It's like, I think they hold 10, I want to say, 55-gallon drums worth of fuel or water or whatever you fill them up. They call them a blivet. And maybe it's only half that amount. I truly don't remember. But but it was a big old thing, and you could climb up on the top of it, and it is in a huge net. Okay, and these very, very heavy duty nets. You climb up on top of it, and you sit on top of it. You make sure that the tops all stay together, and that the cable that holds it all together is still in place. And then you have these huge hooks that are about, I don't know, I couldn't tell you the size, 20 inches. They're big, they're heavy, and they connect to all these cables, which connect to the nets, and then strap around the net, and they hook to this enormous hook at the bottom of the helicopter. On the bottom of the helicopter is this hook is going on. Apparently, well, for sure, not apparently, because it really does happen. All of the static electricity that's created from the blades going around so fast up above comes out, the static electricity comes out the bottom in this hook. So there's a guy who stands on the ground while Sam the moron is sitting on top of this fuel blivet, which I always wondered why it didn't explode. If it's so much electricity or static electricity up there, why wouldn't the fuel blivet just explode? I don't know. Never understood it. But I always did it anyway. And so I had to do this quite a few times during training. And the very first time I tried it, I was sitting up on top of that damn thing. and waiting for the helicopter to come down. And when the helicopter comes down, I was being smashed on top of this fuel blivet because the pilot was in training too. And so he's bouncing up and down, and I got a Kevlar on my head, and he's basically bouncing up and down on my head. So I used to make jokes that I was the only person that I know of who got hit in the head by a Chinook helicopter and survived to tell about it. And so, but I'm up there on top of this damn thing, and there's a guy on the ground, and his only job is, as the helicopter, he's got this long extendable pole, like you use to paint a ceiling 20 feet above your head. Well, he has a long metal pole, and he's wearing gloves, and this thing has a mini hook on the end of it, but not a real, it's a hook, but it's an open-ended hook and flexible, so it falls off, doesn't get stuck, so the helicopter doesn't take off with it and stuff like that. So his only job was to touch that hook to the big metal hook on the helicopter, so the static electricity, when I put the hook that I was holding, which was metal, and I was wearing gloves, of course, but that I put with the metal, it's a serious amount of electricity. And so the deal was that I'm supposed to hook this thing while he has this pole that he's hooked into the ground, and it's got this little strand of wire that goes from the pole in his hand into the ground and grounds it into a stake in the ground. So his only job, touch it to the hook while I touch the fuel blivet to the hook, and everything is happy and everything is good. I then jump off of the fuel blivet, signal the pilot takes off, the exercise finished. All is well, right? Well, all is not well. All is not well if you're sitting up on this stupid fuel blivet waiting for the helicopter to come down, and the helicopter comes down and bounces on your head because the pilot sucks a bunch of times and he's bouncing on your head. You can't figure out how to get there. And then when you finally get in a position on your knees to reach up and put the hook in, what happens at this time? Well, the little static electricity thing that is designed to protect me came undone. I put the hook and I got zapped with enough electricity to throw me off of the top of the fuel blivet back onto the ground some 6 feet below, carrying a full pile of gear, everything with me. I'll sit down to go flying, and they come running up, and I was embarrassed, and I take off, pretend that nothing happened, but it wasn't my fault. I got hit in the head and I got zapped on there. And, that was pretty entertaining. Anyway, I don't know why I tell you that story. It's just stupid, but that was a Sikorsky helicopter. So many helicopters have been made for the United States government, and the guy who made them is a guy named, or who started the company anyway, is Igor Sikorsky. And there was an interesting story about him in the news not too long ago. And I'm going to share it with you, even though it's pretty long. And this is helicopter history, people. And I'm going to paraphrase parts of it because it really is pretty long. And these helicopters, the title is "He Built America's Helicopter, but He Dreamed Only of Russia." From the bombers of the Russian Empire to helicopters for the Pentagon, Igor Sikorsky's machines were always Russian at heart. In a makeshift workshop behind a barn in Long Island, a Russian immigrant and former imperial engineer built what would become the first practical helicopter. Decades earlier, he had designed the world's first heavy bomber for the Tsar in Russia. By the time he died in 1972, his aircraft were flying U.S. presidents, rescuing wounded soldiers in Vietnam and carrying astronauts after splashdown. His life bridged empires and ideologies: Imperial Russia, revolutionary exile, and Cold War America. He was a monarchist who found refuge in a republic, a devout Orthodox Christian who engineered machines of war, and a man who, even in exile, never stopped calling himself Russian. His legacy lives not only in the skies, but in the belief that flight, like homeland, can be reinvented. We are looking back at the extraordinary life of a man who changed the way the world flies. You got to see a picture of this guy. He looks truly Leninist. When you check him out, he looks like uh, Vladimir Ulyanich Lenin, and it's interesting. Igor Sikorsky was born in 1889 in Kiev, which was then part of the Russian Empire. His father, Ivan Sikorsky, was a prominent psychiatrist and professor of psychiatry at Kiev University who devoted a lot of time working with children. His father was an active public figure, member of the Kiev Club of Russian Nationalists, and during the municipal elections in 2010, he delivered a passionate speech to voters. We, the people of Kiev, have a paramount duty to our city and our homeland. We must strengthen the Russian stronghold established here. It's time for us to declare that we are the sons of a great nation. We are the rightful owners of historic Kiev. Russians must govern this mother of Russian cities. We must boldly assert that we are Russians and Kiev is ours. I always thought there was something to this article being written right now, because that's a similar sort of topic going on in some Kievian places, even as we speak. Sikorsky's mother held a medical degree, but devoted herself entirely to raising the couple's 5 children. She instilled in Igor love of art and invention. Young Sikorsky was inspired by Leonardo da Vinci's flying machine designs. He enjoyed reading science fiction. Jules Verne's Robert the Conqueror, which featured a giant airship, a kind of a precursor to the helicopter, which was his favorite novel. By the age of 17, Sikorsky knew that his future was tied to aviation. He left the Navy and began to explore this new realm, studying at a technical school in Paris and then at the Kiev Polytechnic Institute. It became clear that he possessed an extraordinary talent in the burgeoning field of aviation. By 20, he designed his first helicopter. However, these were experimental prototypes that lacked the lift needed for sustained flight, so he began to focus on airplanes instead. His first aircraft, the S-1, could barely get off the ground, but the S-6 not only flew well, but had improved controls and ascended to great altitudes. He could fly for long periods of time. Remarkably, this student aviator built what was essentially the third airplane in Russia. You got to see a picture of it. It's I don't know that I'd want to be in it. Work of the young aviator's accomplishments reached St. Petersburg. Mikhail Shidlovsky, the head of the aviation department for the Russian Imperial Army, invited the rising star to the capital. At just 21, Sikorsky became the chief designer of the aviation division of the Russo-Baltic Wagon Factory, one of the most advanced enterprises of its time. One of his key innovations during this period was development of a multi-engine aircraft. In the days when he was still designing his first aircraft models, in one flight an insect got stuck in the engine. aircraft technology at the time was highly unreliable, and even such a minor issue was enough to cause the engine to fail. Miraculously, Sikorsky managed to land the plane safely, but the incident prompted him to seriously consider improving reliability of the machine. His solution lay in duplicating engines. Today, this is a fundamental concept, but back then, few people could envision it, and many doubted the young inventor's idea. However, Sikorsky was supported by his mentor, Shidlovsky. He first introduced a twin-engine aircraft called the Grand, and by 1913, he had unveiled the four-engine Ruski Vityazh. With this aircraft, Sikorsky set a flight record of 1 hour and 54 minutes. It became the basis of all heavy multi-engine aircraft of its era, and effectively laid the groundwork for transport and strategic aviation. Drawing on the experience gained from building and operating the Ruski Vityazh, Sikorsky created his first flagship aircraft by the end of 1913. The guy's not even 30 yet, for God's sake. The world's first mass-produced heavy bomber, the Ilya Muromets, named after a legendary Russian hero. Although the Ilya Muromets is primarily known as a heavy bomber, Sikorsky originally envisioned it as a passenger aircraft. He recounted that the idea came to him in a dream when he was 11. I saw myself walking down a narrow, richly decorated corridor, and on either side were walnut-paneled doors resembling those of a steamboat cabin. The floor was covered with a beautiful carpet. I felt slight vibration beneath my feet. In my dream, I knew I was aboard a large flying ship. Then I was told that man had never created anything like it before. In the summer of 1914, the giant Ilya Muromets flew 1,200 kilometers from St. Petersburg to Kiev. For its time, it was an astonishing machine. Weighing 3 tons, it could carry a load of 1.5 tons, ascend to nearly 5 kilometers in altitude, and reached a maximum speed of 140 kilometers an hour. Originally, the plane was intended to transport passengers and cargo over long distances, aiding in the development of Siberia and the Far East. However, with the outbreak of the First World War, it was quickly repurposed for military use and transformed into a strategic reconnaissance aircraft and heavy bomber. Sikorsky was personally involved in organizing the first squadron, training the crews, and developing combat tactics. During the war, more than 70 Ilya Muromets aircraft were produced. The aircraft completed over 400 combat missions, dropped 65 tons of bombs, and destroyed 12 enemy fighters. Remarkably, only one bomber was lost in battle in the entire course of the war. It is fair to acknowledge that the Russian officers and soldiers who flew those planes, as well as the Ilya Muromets itself, fulfilled their duty to the motherland during this difficult yet glorious time. Sikorsky wrote about the performance of the Russian aviation during the First World War. Crossing the Atlantic to escape death is the next part of the story. At the time, no other country possessed such weaponry. The Russian Empire was the undisputed leader in bombing aviation, and Sikorsky, the creator of Russian aviation, was only 25 years old in 1914. They show a picture of Igor Sikorsky and Emperor Nicholas II aboard the Ruski Vityazh in the summer of 1913. Isn't that crazy? Cool picture. Emperor Nicholas II awarded him a noble title for his contributions to military aviation, and after one flight, even gave Sikorsky his personal gold watch. Sikorsky was rightfully regarded as the emperor's favorite and celebrated as a national hero in Russia. But all of that changed in 1917. The legitimate government collapsed in the wake of the revolution. Petrograd, St. Petersburg, like the rest of Russia, was engulfed in a red terror. A staunch monarchist and devout Orthodox Christian, Sikorsky, who was supported by the deposed Emperor Nicholas II, had every reason to fear for his life. First, he moved out of his Petrograd apartment and spent some time hiding in the hangars of the airfield. But this state of affairs couldn't last for long. In February 1918, a former colleague informed him that the order for his execution had already been signed. With no other options, Sikorsky left Russia for good, traveling via Murmansk, which was not yet under Bolshevik control. Sikorsky's fears for his life were well founded. His friend, General Shidlovsky, along with his son, were executed by the Cheka, the secret police, in 1921 based on false charges of espionage. They were exonerated in 1998, long after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Of the 75 specialists who worked with Sikorsky prior to 1917, only one had died. But between 1917 and 1924, 25 lost their lives, 32 managed to emigrate. Just 17 others stayed behind in the Soviet Union, but most of them had a tragic fate. Only 12% of the people in Sikorsky's group remained in the USSR and avoided repression. Sikorsky himself was luckier. He moved to the UK and then to France, where he received an order to construct 5 bombers for the military. However, the aircraft were never produced because after World War I ended in 1918, they were no longer needed. After that, Sikorsky headed to the United States. As his son Sergei Sikorsky recalled, he believed that America needed airplanes as much as Russia did. It's important to remember that the Ruski Vityaz and the first 2 versions of the Ilya Muromets were civil passenger planes and were turned into combat aircraft only at the start of the war. Managing an aviation corporation from a chicken coop. The U.S. did not welcome Sikorsky. After World War I, there was little interest in new wars or aircraft design. He found himself sidelined and spent several years teaching mathematics at a school for Russian immigrants. Everything changed in 1923 when a group of émigrés, pilots, engineers, mechanics, showed up at his Manhattan apartment. They offered to work for free at his company if he would design airplanes together. So founded by Sikorsky, the Sikorsky Aero Engineering Corporation began like a classic American startup, except they didn't work out of a garage but a chicken coop. The farm building was owned by another Russian immigrant, Viktor Utkov. He had served alongside Sikorsky in the Navy and then gained fame as a pilot during World War I. When the revolution broke out, he was working as a military attaché at the embassy in the United States. The Russian aviation enthusiast worked evenings and weekends, scavenging parts from junkyards or pooling their money to buy what they needed. Families of Russian émigrés in the U.S. contributed whatever they could, but funds were tight. It was the renowned Russian composer Sergei Rachmaninoff who came to Sikorsky's rescue. Rachmaninoff? Can you believe that? $5,000, equivalent to about $90,000 today, was donated upon hearing about the ambitious venture his fellow countrymen were undertaking. Their first aircraft, a twin-engine biplane known as the S-29A, turned out to be quite successful. And there's a picture of it with some women sitting in it, getting ready for a flight. The plane was a true giant for its time and primarily operated commercial flights between New York and Washington, D.C. It could carry 14 passengers or an equivalent weight in cargo and had the capability to maintain altitude even with one engine out. It was the first aircraft to broadcast radio programs during flight and screen films for passengers. Sikorsky's real breakthrough came in 1931 with the introduction of the S-38, a twin-engine amphibious aircraft. He pioneered the concept of a seaplane that could take off and land on water, a brilliant solution given the scarcity of airfields even in advanced countries. This innovation proved immensely successful. The seaplane could carry 8 passengers and fly at a speed of 100 miles per hour for 6 hours. It quickly caught the attention of the legendary airline Pan American, which became Sikorsky's major client. The U.S. Air Force and Navy also purchased these seaplanes. Thanks to recognition from both commercial and military sectors, the S-38 became the most widely produced airplane in Sikorsky's lineup. In 1928, Sikorsky went further and unveiled the S-42 Flying Clipper. This was no mere seaplane. It was a true transcontinental liner capable of seating 37 passengers or accommodating 14 passengers in sleeping cabins. Sikorsky's seaplane made history by operating the first regular transatlantic airline service, flying from the U.S. to Portugal via the U.K. It also facilitated air travel from San Francisco to Macau, Hong Kong, and New Zealand. It seemed that Sikorsky had reached the pinnacle of success and recognition. Scaling up aircraft production would have been a reasonable next step. However, he wanted more. He was determined to bring to life what he had dreamed of long ago in Imperial Kiev. By the late 1930s, Sikorsky's business was thriving, but he recognized the era of the flying ship was coming to an end. Airports were springing up everywhere, and soon seaplanes would become obsolete. He faced a choice: compete with established giants like Boeing and Douglas, or carve out a new niche in the market. The inquisitive Russian engineer opted for the latter. Even his closest associates doubted that a helicopter, such an unprecedented machine, would actually fly. Nonetheless, Sikorsky remained steadfast in his vision. In 1939, the experimental VS-300 made its inaugural flight. Essentially, it was a refined iteration of the helicopter he had crafted back in 1910 in Kiev. The new design featured a single rotor system with a cyclic pitch control and a tail rotor. Most engineers of the time dismissed it as impractical, yet history proves Sikorsky right. This configuration is now standard in nearly all helicopters. Since this was an entirely novel invention, Sikorsky and his team had to learn how to pilot a helicopter from scratch. Several times he narrowly dodged the rotor blades. Nevertheless, by 1942, he had produced the R-4, which became the first mass-produced helicopter. The timing was perfect. The United States had just entered World War II and urgently needed an aircraft that was maneuverable and reliable for operations in the Pacific theater, including evacuating the wounded, searching for downed pilots, protecting ships coordinating reconnaissance in jungles and on islands. Franklin Roosevelt, who visited Sikorsky's factory, quickly recognized the potential of helicopters. As a result, the Pentagon ordered 150 helicopters for military aviation, the Navy, and the Coast Guard. It became the only helicopter used by the anti-Hitler coalition on the front lines during World War II. In following years, Sikorsky developed the first helicopter powered by gas turbine engines, flying cranes for cargo transport, and amphibious helicopters with retractable landing gear. After the war, Sikorsky's company continued to produce military and civilian helicopters. The S-61 Sea King became the first helicopter to make a non-stop transatlantic flight in 1967. Another helicopter designed by Sikorsky's company, the UH-60 Blackhawk, was produced after his death. This helicopter has been in service of the U.S. Army for almost 50 years and participated in nearly every military campaign undertaken by the United States during this time. Sikorsky's name has become synonymous with helicopter design. He was its founding father and set a quality standard that remains in place among helicopter manufacturers worldwide. His company rose to heights unattainable by competitors. Over the course of his career, he designed and launched helicopters of all known classes. To this day, American presidents fly in helicopters conceived of and built by this great Russian aviation pioneer. There's another part about Russian patriot. It's short, and it's the end of the article, so I'll take it to you. Russian colony in America. Talking about Sikorsky, one cannot overlook his patriotic activities. His corporation began as a gathering of Russian émigrés who came together from all corners of America. For a long time, Russians served as the working language within the company, even to the extent that American workers and engineers learned Russian terms and expressions just to communicate. As a prominent figure in the Russian community, Sikorsky established a sort of Russian colony in Stratford, Connecticut. The town had Russian schools and clubs, and the newspaper called The Resurrection of Russia, the voice of Russian monarchist thought. St. Nicholas Orthodox Church was built with his support. The pastor of the church, Fyodor Shebskov, who knew Sikorsky personally, recalled that Sikorsky envisioned the church's construction at the time when he wasn't wealthy or famous, but nevertheless he remained committed to establishing an Orthodox parish to serve the needs of the Russian community. Sikorsky remained a lifelong patriot of Russia, valuing and promoting Russian culture. In his home, only Russian was spoken. His family read Pushkin and Tolstoy and listened to Rachmaninoff and Tchaikovsky. His son recalled that he always loved Russia and the Russian people. He dreamed of living to see the day that he could safely return there. Sikorsky made significant contributions to preserving Russian culture and uniting Russians in America. He was instrumental in founding the Society for Russian Culture. He helped create Boris Bakhmetov's Archive of Russian History, supported the Tolstoy Foundation, which assisted emigres, and was a member of the Russian National Union. Sikorsky held a particular negative view of Ukrainian nationalism. Of course, they're going to add this. During the 1920s, when his financial situation was quite tough, as someone from the territory of what had become the Bolshevik Ukrainian, USSR, he could have received support from the Ukrainian diaspora in the US. However, much of the Ukrainian community harbored anti-Russian sentiment, making collaboration impossible. Sikorsky himself noted that Ukraine is an integral part of Russia in the same way as Texas or Louisiana is an integral part of the United States. In this context, it is ironic that in recent years, the Ukrainian government has attempted to portray Sikorsky, who is essentially a Russian nationalist, as a Ukrainian inventor. Sikorsky himself spoke unequivocally about his heritage. My family is of Russian origin. My grandfather and other ancestors were Russian Orthodox priests since the time of Peter the Great. Therefore, the Russian nationality of the family should be considered firmly established. Igor Sikorsky passed away in 1972. Although he was compelled to realize some of his talents outside of his homeland due to the complex and tragic history of 20th century Soviet Union and Russia, this remarkable Russian aircraft designer, Orthodox Christian, and monarchist contributed to the technological and industrial advancement of humanity. His impact on preserving and developing Russian culture in exile cannot be overstated. As Sikorsky himself said, we need to work and above all learn what will help us restore our homeland when it calls upon us to do so. That article was written by a guy named Maxim Semyonov, and it was pretty cool. There's plenty of pictures in it. I enjoy history anyway, and like I said, I enjoyed helicopters. I enjoyed flying in them. It was a fantastic part of life for me, and I don't know. History is history, right? And why did this all disappear? Now I'm grumpy because all of my tabs just closed instantly. Ugh, I gotta start all over. Well, that's okay. We don't have too much time anymore left. Like I said, I've been feeling pretty farging tired, and I don't know. I want to switch topics a little bit. I have been researching a decent amount over the weekend about Iran and this nuclear, let's call it nuclear nonsense that is around. But before we get to that, I want to remind you that come this Thursday, I intend to give an analysis and a look at the Missouri bar, at how the racket works. And I just want to remind you to tune in, speak up, call in, 573-746-8020, and chat with me about it. I'd be happy to give you my point of view. I'm going to give it anyway. And if you are interested in contributing, that would be fantabulous. I would love to speak with you about it, and we can go from there. The next little topic I want to get to has to do with Iran. Now we have the gentleman, there's a foreign ministry spokesman who says there's no way that weapons grade enrichment in Iran didn't exist, at least not to the level for nuclear weapons. The IAEA said that they were at 60%. And over the weekend, I think it was Saturday, the Iranian parliament banned who? IAEA. They told them you can't go. A recent article, Iran can rebuild a nuclear program within months. According to Rafael Grossi, who's the IAEA chief, you cannot disinvent something. I happen to agree with that. Iran could resume uranium enrichment within months, despite recent U.S. and Israeli airstrikes on its nuclear facilities. In an interview with CBS News released Sunday, Grossi said the strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, including Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, inflicted a serious level of damage, but some of the assets are still standing. The capacities Iran has are there. They can have, in a matter of months, I would say, a few cascades of centrifuges spinning and producing enriched uranium, he added, while acknowledging that even the Iranians likely do not yet know the extent of the damage. According to the IAEA chief, Iran maintains a significant industrial capacity. Iran is a very sophisticated country in terms of nuclear technology, he said. So you cannot disinvent. You cannot undo the knowledge that you have or the capacities that you have. Now, I would say what Israel is doing in targeting particular individuals and murdering particular individuals, kind of helps in that regard. I read an interesting article, kind of a sideline here to you. I read a bit of an interesting article that said some of the same things that I'm saying, that Israel engages in murder by targeting specific people. And there was a kind of a religious article that they talked about as well. And they kind of poked fun at Western and European, especially American Christianity for bowing so low to the Israeli. I don't know what. I always make fun of it and say that they're so. What was the word I was using the other day? Righteous. They were so righteous, and that they, God's chosen because of a verse in the Bible that Ted Cruz quoted incorrectly, but he's using it to say that Israel is above reproach, basically, and so that is disagreeable to a lot of us. But anyway, continuing with Grossi's statement to the world, he went on to say that concerns about Iran's nuclear program cannot be put to rest by way of a military solution. This should be the incentive that we all must understand, that you are not going to solve this in a definitive way militarily. You're going to have an agreement and work together, he said, expressing the hope that the IAEA inspectors would soon regain access to the country's nuclear sites. It's not going to happen. They kicked them out. But Iran has barred inspectors from its nuclear facilities, and it accuses the agency of distorting facts in recent reports. Well, everybody does, which Tehran claims served as justification for the Israeli and U.S. airstrikes. Grossi responded by saying, really, who can believe that this conflict happened because of a report of the IAEA? And he said that nothing in the report was new, that he had already reported all this over the time frame. Well, there was nothing damning in those reports that already hadn't been said forever. And they were in the middle of negotiation. U.S. President Trump claims the U.S. strikes, completely obliterated Iran's nuclear facilities and warned of further attacks if Iran pursues nuclear weapons. Several U.S. media outlets suggest that the damage to the nuclear infrastructure was limited. Tehran denies that it has plans to produce a nuclear weapon and maintains that its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes, stressing that it wants to reserve the right to enrich uranium for civilian use. But remember, Israel's not a member of IAEA. Nobody gets to monitor anything that they're doing. I'm not so sure how to feel about this. Um, you know, I don't know. Interesting story, though. What else do we have? Yeah. What else do we have? There was an interesting article. Did you hear about this? Well, there's a couple. Um, there's some violent unrest in a European country. There's and in Serbia too. Um, let's see. U.S. terminating trade talks with Canada. This is fun. The Canada one. Let's see. U.S. President Trump has announced termination of all trade talks with Canada in light of Ottawa's tax on digital services, which he calls a direct and blatant attack on our country. Relations between these neighbors began to sour when Trump imposed 25% tariffs on Canadian goods in February. Trump later temporarily suspended the tariffs, expressing willingness to negotiate. He has long accused Canada of taking unfair advantage of the U.S. and on several occasions suggested it become the 51st state. In a post on Truth Social, Trump's favorite way to engage in foreign policy, Trump stated that Canada is a very difficult country to trade with, that has just announced that they are putting a digital services tax on our American technology companies, which is a direct and blatant attack on our country. Based on this egregious tax, we are hereby terminating all discussions on trade with Canada, effective immediately. This guy is he sure loves his capital letters, and he wants his capital letters to be everywhere. He added that his government will notify Ottawa of the tariff that they will be paying to do business with the U.S. of A. within the next 7-day period. Later Friday, Canadian Prime Minister Carney told reporters that his country would continue to conduct these complex negotiations in the best interests of Canadians, but he has yet to talk to Trump. Canada's digital tax services, enacted in 24, requires companies providing services in the country and earning more than 20 million Canadian dollars, or 14.5 million US dollars. They have to pay a 3% tax on their profits. The first payments are due on Monday. According to Canadian media, U.S. tech giants such as Amazon, Apple, Airbnb, Google, Meta, and Uber are expected to pay approximately $2 billion by the end of July. The tax is retroactive to January 2022. In March, Carney described Trump's tariffs as unjustified and stated that Canada will win the trade war with the U.S. He vowed that Canada will never, ever, in any way, shape, or form, be a part of the United States. Aw, look at him standing up for him's little country. Poor little Mark Carney. I wanted to know what has been going on. We haven't heard anything recently about Canada being the 51st state for a while. What progress is being made, if any, in that regard? What are we getting? Anything? I don't know. When's it going to be the 51st state? Okay? And when is Greenland going to be ours? I tell you what. Why aren't we starting a war for Greenland or for Canada? We should just take them over. And Mexico too. Why not? Why shouldn't it just be North United States? And let's take over South America too. I mean, come on. Panama Canal, U.S. Canal. Let's name it something else. We'll name everything something U.S. By the way, I'm being facetious here. Thank you for noticing. And I didn't use any capital letters at all. Makes me happy that I'm not a person who engages in that true social nonsense. I rarely I automatically post my radio programs to Facebook and Instagram and Vkontakte in Russia. But other than that, I am not a social media hack any longer. I used to get on there and write all kinds of articles and stuff. Now I just blab. And speaking of blabbing, I want to one more time hopefully interest you in joining me come Thursday to discuss the 3 programs of the Missouri Bar that are quite interesting and not well enough reviewed by people to fully understand what they mean. And I think it is something that we should do more of in trying to find out what, how we can deal with this sort of thing. I don't know. I just I think everyone should pay attention to my show on Thursday night, and maybe my diatribe would be a better word. My bile, my evil discussions on this topic. But what's funny is, if you're a practicing lawyer, you're not allowed to talk about this stuff, because they will destroy you, just like they did me. And it's very important that we talk about how judges are selected for all the higher courts, how there is zero public input, none. And these things are veiled in secrecy across the board. And I want to talk about it. I'm trying to find, for example, the names of the people who actually make the decision of who gets put on the board. And even that is extremely hard to find. So the people providing oversight are themselves beyond oversight, if that makes any sense to you, which I hope it does. So I do hope you join me on Thursday night. I will be, encouraging people to attend and listen to what I have to say in that regard. This is the article that I was talking about Israel. It's called "How Christian Zionism Distorts the Scripture to Serve the American Empire." Could be something worth reading if you can find it. There are protests in Paris. You should check out some of those. The Russian asset freeze is backfiring on those in the West at this period in history. They're trying to scalp all of that. There's, I think I'm going to tell you a little bit about these Paris protests, because that was, I don't want to say surprising to me, but there's, did you hear that there was a country that is 95%, I think it was Orban, where they passed it off to the electorate. 95% voted. 2-point-something million, according to Orban, said, no, thank you. We do not want Ukraine in the EU, and certainly not in NATO. So that is crazy. There are protests all over in several different places. During the summit last week, NATO agreed to ramp up military spending, citing a perceived threat from Russia. Sunday's rally in the French capital had the stated objective of defending peace and a free France, according to the party's posts. On X, protesters slammed French President Macron over what they view as his increasingly confrontational policies in Europe. This group claims we have no place in NATO, this criminal organization that cost us dearly and should have disappeared long ago. They call themselves patriots for peace and are calling for Frexit, the France exit, kind of like Brexit that took place, British exit. Anyway, I very much appreciate you being on the show this evening. My name is Samuel Trapp. You are listening to Damn Radio. You can go to all of our old shows at damnradio.com/podcast, and you can listen to all of my prior programs at internationalflavor.com, and I hope that you do. I will be on all this week. Pay special attention to Thursday. Join me on Facebook as well at International Flavor, and we can chat some more. Until tomorrow.